So this meeting, Councillor Pull and Councillor Condor. This meeting, ladies and gentlemen, of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. The recording of the meeting will remain online for 4 years, and if you are present here in the chamber, you are consenting to appearing in the recording and broadcast, which may also be used for training purposes. Before we enter the substantive part of the meeting, as members can see, we have another busy agenda this evening with lots to get through. Please could I ask members of the committee to keep your questions succinct and direct, and remind cabinet members, have we got any here? Remind cabinet members and officers in attendance to proceed directly to the answer, again keeping them concise and relevant, please. Want to ensure that we get through all the items on the agenda today and to give all members the chance to speak if they would like to do so. Thank you. So, looking to my right for some help and advice, please. So, Lauren, I think we're on apologies. Yep. And do you want to read the list out? I know I've got it.
Thank you, Chair. So tonight we've had apologies from Councillor S. Chamber, Councillor Hyland and Councillor Bell. Councillor Miller and Councillor Patel are attending as substitutes, but I think Councillor Patel will be here a little bit later.
Okay, thank you for that. So declarations of interest. Members, I think, probably filled in the right forms and registers for any declarations of interest. Nothing else arising, apart from on my left, I'm being advised. Owen.
Thank you, Chair. I continue to be a board member of the airport for item 9 on the agenda.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks for that. So item 3, declaration of party whipping to declare any issue, if any issues need to be covered in the agenda or under party whip. Take that silence, look around the room, is none. Minutes of the last meeting. Okay, for me to approve those as a true record. All those in favour? Any against? Anne's got an amendment, I think.
Yeah, Chair, I've just suggested a very small tidying up. There was a slight smushing between myself and Councillor Condor in terms of our interest, but I've just suggested that that's just tidied up for the record.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just ask a question on point 6515? That the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee write to the cabinet to request that it immediately instructs an independent forensic accountants to investigate where the council funds have been spent. I assume you wrote to the cabinet.
So we wrote,
and did we have a response? Thank you.
Support the idea of a forensic investigation into the financial issues. Do you remember? The instruction was that I would write to the cabinet and ask for them to support that. And I did send off, had some help to scope it out, sent an email to them quite quickly after the meeting, and I got no response, and there's been no action to set up a forensic inquiry into the financial situation and how it arose. There's no response to the email, and there's no. You've listened to Councillor Hilton, who's here. There's been no effort on their part to answer this committee's request that a forensic inquiry take place to ascertain how we came to get into this dire financial situation. Not the amazing thing, but for me, the important thing of that decision and of this committee was that nobody voted against it. It was virtually unanimous. I think there was one abstention. So it was how committees should work, not dividing along political lines. And I think that gave it strength. So, Councillor Hilton, would you like to comment why you didn't reply to the committee or why you decided not to follow through on the call of the committee, unanimous call, to hold a financial and forensic inquiry into how we got into this financial situation?
As I probably said already in the public meeting, I did receive your email. We've already carried out detailed forensic examination of our accounts through our auditors, Ernst Young, and through the assistance of Chartered Institute of Public Finance, and helping us get to grips with the financial situation that this council inherited. And I understand the bill for that so far is £80,000 to employ forensic accountants to go through all that again back to 2020, 2021 would cost a fortune, and we haven't got the money as we know from the accounts. And we think we think at least 200,000 for the 1 year, and probably more, costs £200,000 a year for auditors to do our accounts. So you can imagine what it would be over 5 years, and they would be much more detailed things. We've already had SIPFA say there is no evidence whatsoever of fraud. So it would be not helpful to spend all that money going back to try and find out whether every line on the spreadsheet was accurate or not. Just wouldn't be. We think it's much better to invest that money. We're going to invest £250,000 in next year on strengthening our asset management team, where it's been identified our commercial income is below par, and we're going to spend, and we'll put a report to Cabinet in March on how we plan to strengthen the resources of the finance team. And that's it. But I do think, if we have the money at some point, it might be worth us having a look at the decisions that were made, but not only in the leadership, not only within the officer leadership, but the political leadership of the council, possibly going back to the Together Gloucester reorganisation, where I think we cut back our staffing to a point where some of the departments suffered and failed. It's things that we're resolving. As you already know, we've resolved and we've taken action on our enforcement, on our planning enforcement officers and other things. We're starting to get to grips with that. We're starting to see successes. That's where we are. There was no identification by either of the opposition, any of the opposition groups, or how we were going to source their forensic examination, which has mostly been done already. So there's no point in duplicating it.
I'm not going to prolong this. We'll move on to the rest of the agenda. It was a shame that nobody from the Cabinet or yourself, Leader, formally replied to the committee. It was a unanimous decision of the committee. I think it was disrespectful and not very courteous to the way that this committee operates. We were very mindful, looking at one or two of the members who spoke in that debate, that it had to be proportionate, and it had to take into account of the situation, the finances. That was made very forcibly, and I'd be grateful at some stage if you and your deputy can share with us as a committee your evidence for the figures that you quote on the cost of such an inquiry. I don't recognise them. I think they're plucked out of the air. But do us a favour, please, Leader. Let us see those figures and substantiate them, because I just don't recognise them. I don't know, Councillor Pullen, if you want to say anything.
You might not recognise them, Chair, but you might not recognise them, Chair, but that's the advice I've had from the finance officer, that the cost of the normal annual audit by external auditors is around £200,000. So that gives you an idea of what forensic examination might cost over a 5-year period of accounts. And bear in mind, we ended up taking office with 3 years sets of accounts unfinished, unaudited, undone, not delivered, and we've delivered those 3, we've finalised those 3 already. So we're making progress. Let's make progress. Let's move forward. Okay,
well, maybe you can obtain that breakdown for us via the by the member of staff you refer to. Councillor Pullen.
The question was, did you write? And yes, you did. And the question was, did you get a response? No, you didn't. That's all I wanted to know.
And in that case, so we got to item 3, declaration of party whip, and I think we've moved on from there. The minutes of the last meeting. Anne, you're okay? We've got your amendment, and Bradley. So public question time. No questions from the public. I think you're the IT guy, are you? Can't remember. No. Okay. Well, you're not a member of the public. I don't mean to be disrespectful. Okay. So no petitions and deputations. No. And so this is where we're going to rejig the agenda slightly. So I thought, Andy Hearn, you were here for just one item, but you're here for a car park review as well. Is that right? Yep. Okay, cool. So can you give us the airport update now and we'll bring it forward, please? Thanks. Well, you and the leader, I guess, yeah.
You okay, Chair, to start?
Yeah, just sign it. Sign.
That's all right. Andy Hearn, the head of place, will give you a quick update.
Evening, councillors. Just for record as well, the person sat behind me is Ben Turner. He's a property manager, works in the asset management team.
Okay, I should have been a little more serious and not frivolous. I apologise for that, and you're very welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Randy, for pointing that out to put me in my place. Thank you.
He's a good chap. So on the airport, just as I set out in the email earlier on, we have to remember that we are 50-50 shareholders with Cheltenham Borough Council in this, and therefore the communication, the consideration to how the communication is set out is incredibly important right now. And I did set out that earlier on. It's fair to say that I can't give a direct update right now because the discussions and negotiation is still very much ongoing. So everything that is being said and negotiated is still very commercially sensitive. So I can't give detailed information. What I can say is that officers, including myself now, with a significant amount of time are being invested across Cheltenham and Gloucester to try and bring this to conclusion. And that we're working very hard behind the scenes, but there's only so much within our gift that we can actually do. As officers, obviously, we're not the buyers, so we're doing everything within our capability, but right now it's a bit of a waiting game on our part. And as soon as I have more information and as soon as we get more direction between the two councils, we'll be able to share more detail. And as I said in my email to you, Chair, earlier on, I think, you know, your original suggestion, which was having that shared ONS group between Gloucester and Cheltenham is a good one. I think it was well received last time between the two councils, and I think Cheltenham would also be up for that as well, because I think it was well received last time. So that would be my suggestion for a course of action.
Okay, let's open it up to others. Any questions or comments? No questions or comments? Councillor Corrin.
Thank you. Thanks for that update. You said that you want to bring this to a conclusion. We all want to bring it to a conclusion. Can you give us an indication of when you would want to bring it to a conclusion, or when can we expect some sort of conclusion to be reached?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Terry. You know, so you can imagine the frustration on our part as well, and how this is proceeding. I mean, the reality here is ASAP is the only answer I can give, because all officers want to bring this to a conclusion as physically soon as possible. But as I say, with the greatest of respect, there is only so much that we can do at this stage. So pushing as hard as we can and collaborating with Cheltenham to get this to a conclusion is the best we can do. In terms of a time frame right now, sat here today, I can't give you a dedicated timeline. What I can say is that we're working as hard as we can to bring one. But right now, ASAP is the realistic version right now, as I'm sat in front of you.
Louise, and then Sarge Patel.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I mean, although things aren't proceeding at the pace we'd all like to see, do you simply feel generally optimistic that the sale will go through?
Thank you, Liz. I think at this stage it's really difficult for me to say. Yeah, you know, any sale process has got its risks. If you ask me if I'm confident, again, it's very difficult for me to say. You know, the time lag, the extensions, etc. Obviously, we're all feeling pretty frustrated and pretty let down by the extensions that have taken place. So I can't sit here and tell you one way or the other right now. The officers are doing as much as they can to try and bring it to a conclusion. But it's not within my gift right now to actually say one way or another. We just need to keep doing what we can to try and support.
Fingers crossed, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Patel.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just wondering, can you elaborate on what the potential reasons are for the delays? Because this isn't really much of an update apart from telling us that it's sensitive, commercially sensitive, and we can't give you any more. It should have been done and dusted by now, and the fact it isn't, there's something fishy going on, and it almost feels like it's being hidden from us, like we're mugs. So open up, have some honesty and transparency with us and tell us what's going on. If you need to take it behind closed doors without the media, do that. Give us an update. Otherwise, it's a waste of time having an item on the agenda that doesn't tell us anything. I mean, I've heard rumours that there's negotiations happening with regard to potential areas of land being used for housing development. Is there any truth in that? It's a simple question. Give us an answer.
For the leader to answer, do you think? You're very quiet, Jeremy. That's not like you. That's a bit worrying in itself.
Well, I mean, firstly, just to say, you want a simple answer. I did ask for this not to be on the agenda because it's too premature right now. I did suggest that this was too early for it to come back because the detail isn't there. There's nothing fishy going on, and to suggest that I would be doing something fishy is incredibly discourteous because I'm working very hard with the team across to try and bring this to a conclusion. I do understand the frustration though, and believe me, I feel frustrated myself with this. You know, if you want more information, as I said, I think a joint overview scrutiny session would be a good idea with Cheltenham because it can then be in a consolidated format where all members can be briefed with the same information at the same time. But right now, there's only so much I can say because if we start to give out information that is commercially sensitive and we're still in negotiation period, we open ourselves up to potential jeopardy, potential legal liability, etc. So that is where we are right now, and I'm giving you the truest version of what I can give you.
If I can just come back on the point around something fishy, not for 1 second did I suggest that there's something fishy with what you're doing. So if there was any interpretation of that, then I take that back. That was not the case. What I was saying was there's something fishy with this whole situation that we have, and I appreciate the officers are trying their best to try and get this resolved. But sadly, the problem is it isn't being resolved. And week after week, the longer it goes on, the more worrying and concerning it gets from members' point of view. Let's not forget the financial situation that we are in at the moment as well. And we all want this deal, we all want this sale done and dusted so we can receive the funds that we need desperately. Thank you.
So, can you remind us, please, when you opened the negotiations, when they began, sometime last year, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, from my own perspective, I only got involved in this in the back end of November, largely to put some senior officer support to it when the Section 151 officer at Cheltenham obviously became ill and then sadly passed away. So I haven't been involved in this from the start. I think the negotiations probably were ongoing towards the start of last year. And I think the original conclusion was supposed to be somewhere around July, if I'm honest.
Did they begin before you arrived?
Yeah. Well,
So can the leader tell us when they were started? When did you start negotiating with this company to take over the?
But it was just after the council meeting when we agreed to proceed with the sale of the airport. And then we, not long after that, confirmed the preferred bidder, and negotiations basically started immediately.
So what month was that, please?
I can't remember the exact month. I'm not going to say so in a public meeting.
Appreciate it's been a long time.
Without checking my diary. But you can check back. If you want to check back, it will be straight after the council meeting, which I think was in June or July time. So it would have been straight away. The negotiations would have started immediately. I mean, negotiations to some extent were, discussions were being held with all the bidders because they were visiting the airport and asking questions and things like that at the time. So that, it would have happened soon after that, the agreement, that the winning bidder negotiations started.
So, joint scrutiny committee meeting tomorrow. What could you tell them tomorrow that you can't tell us today?
I wouldn't be advising you to have it tomorrow. I'd be advising you to give it a little bit of time so that the officers can bring things to a conclusion so that we can give you up-to-date information and actually give you the information that you're looking for. Some of the information that you're asking simply can't be given right now in a public forum. There is the opportunity, for example, if you wish that later in the stages, but right now you wouldn't get anything tomorrow that you're not getting from me now.
So even if we met tomorrow as a joint committee, I'm not quite sure I understand why you couldn't tell us where we are at the moment. I'm not trying to be awkward. Just trying to understand what remains for us to be told to the joint committee. Sorry, I didn't express that very well. I apologise.
I'm not saying you'll get anything different. What I'm saying is right now I'm giving you the information that I've got at hand, as much factual information as I can give you as a senior officer looking across this. The point I'm trying to make is that as we try, as officers across Gloucester and Cheltenham, as we try to bring things to a close, things will unravel that would be better suited to have both councils in an overview and scrutiny meeting over the next couple of weeks, say, where we might be in a position to give more information. Right now I can't because I'm waiting on that information coming in. So I could tell you when that information comes in, but it would certainly be better to present that information to both councils because there's a 50-50 shareholder position here, rather than me trying to give it you and someone at Cheltenham trying to give it to someone at Cheltenham. It's a much better position to just do it in one session.
So probably the last one from me. What are you suggesting then? Are you suggesting that we have a meeting of the relatively quite small joint committee between Gloucester and Cheltenham councils, or open it up for a meeting of both councils, the entire council, and tell them there? What sort of option would you prefer? The small group, or to have all of the councillors from both councils in the room at the same time? I'm not quite sure what you're suggesting. And I think you said that could be arranged for 2 weeks' time.
I'm saying there was a format last time in which you called, which was a joint overview and scrutiny meeting, which was Gloucester and Cheltenham, which seemed to work well, if I recall. I sat there, I wasn't particularly involved, but it seemed to work well and it was well received. I'm suggesting the same format, same people, because that seemed to work well. In terms of timing, 2 weeks is not necessarily what I'm saying. What I'm saying is over the next couple of weeks, more information will come out and we'll be in a more credible position to give that information. If you do it tomorrow, I'm not going to be able to give you anything more than what I've got right now, but officers need the time to be able to give that information and present it in such a way. And I think it would be better done in a joint overview and scrutiny meeting like you called last time.
Okay, that's helpful, and I understand what you're saying. It's very clear. Thank you. So just looking at my colleagues, can you remember how many? Was it 4 members from each authority, roughly?
I'd have to check, Chair. I think that sounds about right. But I've got, I know the membership list, so I've taken away an action. We'll liaise with Andy and get a date in the diary when we have more information for a joint.
Okay, and thanks, Lauren. That committee's only met once, but I think it was a good meeting. The people from Cheltenham we've never met before, we gelled and we had a useful exchange of views. So if you're suggesting if we set that up for 14 days' time, you should be able, apologise if you think I'm giving you a hard time. I think one of the issues around all of this is the secrecy. It's the fact that we don't have the answers to the questions people are asking when they stop us in our own neighbourhoods. That's the frustration. And I appreciate you can't tell us what you don't know. But as a way forward, you're suggesting that if we get the joint committee to meet in 14 days' time, hopefully you will be able to be in a much better position to tell us as a joint committee where you are or where you're not, whatever the case, wherever the situation dictates. Does that make sense? Sort of, hopefully.
Yeah, and I don't perceive you to be giving me a hard time. It's the questions that I expect to be asked. 14 days time, I'm not going to commit to because I need to speak with Cheltenham, but I will send an email around over the next 24 hours with some suggested dates. But I'll agree that with Cheltenham tomorrow, and then we can go from there.
Are we okay with that, looking around the committee? We okay with that as a way forward, or is there anything else we could do or should be doing? Anybody else help me out? Somebody say something? Okay.
Can I just check one point of clarity? Because I think we're talking about two different things here.
I hope we're not.
Well, the sale of the airport is one issue, but my understanding of the joint scrutiny between Gloucester and Cheltenham, and I might be wrong, was to look at operational issues of the airport rather than issues around the sale of the airport. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, it was to, it was, I can't remember actually, it's so long ago. Pardon? Yeah, I'm being advised that's almost irrelevant. And if we have a joint scrutiny committee set up, I think that's what I'm being advised, use it. I'm meeting 14 days time and find out what the officer can tell us and not be strictly bound by whatever the original terms of reference were. So does that clarify the position? Okay, and over here, somebody put their hand up. Anne?
Thank you, Chair. I read in the local media quite an interesting piece of speculation and suggestions about the way forward for the airport, which was an interesting view. Things aren't progressing as we would like them to. It's taking a little bit more time, and I appreciate when things are commercially sensitive, things can take time for them to come to where we want them to come to. However, and I appreciate you can't detail this, but is there a plan B? If things don't go the way that you want them to, is there a plan B?
Can I just say, with any such major sale, the officers of both Cheltenham and Gloucester will have been looking at possible plan Bs. That would be normal practice. Do I know what all those plan Bs might be? No, because the sale is still progressing and we're still in discussions with the potential buyer. As you know, so the plan B is there because that's normal practice to have your options looked at, just like a football manager will have his team and then we'll have a plan B of pulling in another right back or whatever it is when they're not playing so well. It's always the same thing. You've got to make sure that you've got an options available. But and what you see in the press is people speculating what they think the plan B might be, and a lot of that speculation is not at all accurate, and it's not based on any definite understanding of the situation and how you would operate Gloucestershire Airport in the future. But that's all, that's where we are. A plan B, there's options available, and the officers know to some extent what they could be, but nothing's been worked out because we're still in a situation of trying to conclude the sale.
If I could just add as well, because I do know it's frustrating, and I sense the frustrated views in the room. And having worked in the industry for a long, long time now, it's certainly not to be obscure or to keep things. This is a very, very difficult process to go through, whether you're in the private sector, the public sector, any sale, any transaction is very difficult. Okay, the reality here is the commitment level to doing the right thing for the area has never wavered. The officers that I'm working with, the team that we are working with, are consistently devoted to making sure that all decisions are completely scrutinised to make sure that the decisions made are right for the area, for the public, all done on the basis of what we feel and what we know is important to the people of the area and what's important to the members that we've heard over the last 6 or 7 months. So whilst right now it might feel frustrating and all of the questions that are being asked tonight are completely valid and I totally understand them, there is a process to go through. That process is not an easy one, and the officers that are working on it are trying their hardest, very much their hardest, to bring everything in line. And right now, it's very difficult because we are bound by certain legislation and by certain acts that mean we can't say too much. But rest assured, there is a lot of work happening in the background.
Do you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. That's really heartening to hear. Plan A is definitely where you want it to be. It's what you've chosen as the best option, the one that looks the best bid. But it's really good to know, as it's standard practice, that you've got backup, you've got other options. If things happen the way we don't want them to, then there is other things and other ways forward. So thank you for that.
So following on from that, I think listening to the leader, you were saying there's no plan B, it's a series of options. Is that right?
No, it's absolutely not, definitely. There's no definite plan B at all. If the sale doesn't conclude, there will be a number of options which would have to be interrogated and considered in detail. So the officers might well have been looking at what those scenarios could be, but absolutely nothing has been discussed certainly with me in any detail. So there is not a definitive plan B. Definitely not a definitive plan B.
So it'll be back to, in effect, it'd be back to the drawing board with all options considered?
If that was the case, yeah.
Okay, fine. I think just one more point from me before Councillor Patel comes in. I think part of our frustration comes in from the situation where we had a deadline at the end of January and everybody was thinking, oh, get Christmas out of the way, get New Year, and we're going to know exactly what we're doing with the airport. And then January came and nothing happened. And then I picked it up, and it's dangerous to listen to speculation. I appreciate that. Should it be longer than tooth enough not to pay too much attention to it? But then the story was, oh, well, it's going to be Saturday, the end of February, whatever the date was on Saturday. So it's not January, it's February now. And that deadline, which obviously wasn't in place, which wasn't a fact, we passed that date, and here we still are, not much wiser. And I do understand your difficulty if there are commercial issues that you can't share with us, but I think it's the frustration of not knowing and not having a clear idea whether we're actually in a viable situation or whether it's all just going to end up with a plan B and nothing to latch on to. So I think if it's okay with the committee, we'll wrap it up there and take it forward. Oh, sorry, Sarge. I'll take Sarge, but I just want to finish this. Take it forward in tell Cheltenham that we want to convene a meeting of the Joint Scrutiny Committee in 14 days times 1421. So long as you think that's a fair amount of time and you won't be saying to us, sorry, you need to scrub that, was never realistic. You're happy 1421 days? Is that a good length of time, a reasonable and credible length of time?
Andrew, I think we'd also have to ask Cheltenham Borough Council.
No, sure, we've got to get their agreement, but I'm trying to tie that up so that they can't come back to us and say, oh, I don't know where you got that figure from, that's nonsense. So I just wanted to confirm with Mr. Hearn that that is, in your opinion, a realistic and fair timeline to come up with.
I'll speak to Cheltenham first thing tomorrow and I'll come back with what I think is a realistic time.
So we'll take Councillor Patel, then we'll wrap it up. But I think that's a really fair, a good way to proceed, and it's sounds quite encouraging, a good suggestion. So Sarge, you got the last word almost.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It would be useful to know what its costs from the council's perspective with regard to the sale from June until now. How much it's going to cost the taxpayer, bearing in mind taxpayers already paying out in increased council taxes, parking charges, everything else. And also, if the sale does go through, it doesn't sound very reassuring from the leader, to be honest with you, in my opinion, this evening. If the sale does fall through, sounds like we don't actually have a plan B at this stage. What would be useful to know, or what would like some reassurances, if it does, if that asset does go for development, it would be better housing development. It would be better if it didn't go to a private company to make vast sums of profit, and it was sold by or sold by the council. So we make the profit. We get the money for our residents and taxpayers, because that land is a valuable asset worth millions and millions if it was for residential development. And then the final point, Chair, is on the council's website, back from 9th of July 2025, where we announced that Horizon Aero Group was named as a company set to take over the airport to new heights. And it says it's going to lead us into a new exciting chapter, unlocking opportunities for growth and investment. I really hope that still happens. Otherwise, we won't be taking the airport to new heights. We'll be taking the airport to new lows.
Well, I think the costs of the sale are borne by effectively the asset of the company, rather than it's not coming directly out of our council tax. But the costs will have started in Richard Cook's time, when it was announced that there was a potential sale of the airport, and the costs of employing BPE as the lawyers, and the cost of Savills as the experts on the sale of an airport or the land. So when I became the leader, Savills would already been commissioned to do. They'd done quite a bit of the work as preparatory work. I know that. So what the costs of the sale, I wouldn't know what they are at the moment, and wouldn't know until the whole issue has been concluded. It would be it would just be purely guesswork. But it's not necessarily cheap to employ these experts.
You want to move on, Sarge? So did you indicate you wanted to come back?
Yeah, I was just going to say the costs from the moment that this company said they were interested in buying it, and all the officer time and resources and Savills costs from then onwards, there must be a figure somewhere.
There must be, but I couldn't give you that figure at this point in time. Well, I don't think we'll have got it. I don't think we'll have got the costs fully concluded. And I think what you expect is when if you've concluded the deal, you would then look back and say this is what the costs were, things like that, and how it was shared out. But bearing in mind we are working with Cheltenham Borough Council as well, so we haven't got the veto on this or that. We actually negotiated on this, and I know Bishop Cook negotiated the appointment of Savills at the beginning, so I took over at the point when they were already appointed.
Yeah, I just supposed to wrap up, I suppose, just on point two. What I just want us to be careful and mindful of is any speculation around what Plan B might look like. I recognise the frustration around not having a Plan B, but there's multiple options being assessed and viability being put to them. When we talk about private housing development, private sale, that's very dangerous in the sense of the tone of that. So we just need to be mindful that nothing has been decided, no outcomes have been agreed, and all options will be completely appraised and decisions will be made across the two councils. So just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, I think the committee's ready to go with your suggestion that we meet in 14 days' time, so long as we can get Cheltenham to go along with us. Looking at my colleagues on the right, are you pretty sure that tomorrow morning you can get on the phones and the emails and get Cheltenham organised to enable them to meet with us very, very quickly? And then Mr Hearn and the leader will come back and share with both committees where exactly we are. Okay, is that the way forward? It's the only way forward, isn't it? That's the only thing we can do this evening. Okay, so Mr Hearn, Mr Leader, thank you so much. And right on cue, the monitoring officer from the County Council's arrived. We're going to take your item on the agenda now, Rob, to save you sitting through the rest of the finance work. Yep. So I've briefly outlined what you outlined to us at Corporate Overview Scrutiny Committee last week, but I've got some of it around my neck, I think. So I told them to wait till you arrived to have the facts as opposed to what I thought were the facts. You've got the floor, Rob. Just introduce yourself. Probably a lot of people you don't know.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Rob Ailiff. As the Chair said, I'm Monitoring Officer at the County Council, but I'm here in my capacity as sponsor for one of the 11 work streams that have been set up in support of local government reorganisation, specifically the one that's looking at governance and legal. And I'm here this evening because I was asked as part of that role to look at what the options might be for scrutinising that process. So that's what I'm here to talk through. Now, my eyesight isn't what it used to be, so I'm hoping I can see my slides from here. Otherwise, you might need to pause while I... brilliant. Thank you very much. So if we can just move on to the first slide. So as I say, the task I was given was to consider what the options might be for scrutinising the local government reorganisation portfolio. Just to set that into context, we have stood up or begun to stand up a portfolio of 11 work streams that will be overseeing the preparation and delivery of local government reorganisation in Gloucestershire. That's being overseen by a steering group comprising the leaders of the 7 councils and by a programme board comprising the chief executives and senior officers of those same councils. And obviously, because that's being delivered jointly, there was an interest in seeing what the options were for scrutinising that jointly. In considering how to approach that, there's part of that that's very technical. What are the constitutional and legal options for setting up joint scrutiny? And I will talk you through those in the next couple of slides. But I also wanted to approach it from the point of view, kind of culturally, what is it that's going to help us towards a new future of unitary councils, recognising that at the moment, while we're working separately as 7 councils, hopefully in the new world, a number of us will find ourselves around the table, part of 1 or 2 councils. So I'm viewing this largely as kind of preparing the groundwork for that as well from a cultural point of view. There are also a handful of factors that I wanted to take into consideration that play out slightly differently in each of the options. And those are the ones on the bottom half of the slide. So first of all, depending on what option we choose, that has different implications for the political balance of those scrutiny arrangements, and I'll talk through that in a little bit more detail. I also wanted to think about the ease of standing this thing up. There's a limited window of opportunity here during which the committee or panel will be operating, and so I wanted to play into that scenario, kind of how long each one would take to set up. There are also obviously cost implications of servicing any committee, and I'll talk you through those. Perhaps more importantly, though, I think we want a model that's got some flexibility built into it. The process of LGR is such that what we need at this stage of the process might not be what we need later on in the process. So we want a model that's able to adapt and adopt different ways of working as we work through that. I did also consider, as a scrutiny committee, you'll be familiar that one of the ways in which a committee has teeth is through its powers of calling. And different options present different opportunities in terms of how that would work. And then finally, I wanted to think about frequency of meetings, given that we have got a limited window within which this arrangement will be stood up. So if I can just go on to the next slide, just to emphasise that point as to why I think the speed may be of the essence in this case. The LGR process is going to take place over several years. We know that the likely vesting day government is aiming for is April 2028. But between now and then, we'll have elections to either a continuing authority or to shadow authorities that will take place in May 27. And from that point on, the likelihood is those new shadow authorities will want to start setting up their own scrutiny arrangements. So in terms of joint scrutiny between the 7 councils, it's really the period between now and May 27 that we need to be focusing on. Given that period is little over 14 months, then I think that's why we want a model that we can stand up relatively quickly and relatively easily. Next slide, please. So at headline level, there are 4 options that we looked at and considered the pros and cons of. The first is a formal joint scrutiny committee. We've got examples of that running across the county at the moment. Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee is a joint committee formed by statute. We also have the Police and Crime Committee that's a form of scrutiny. So we've got examples of that running already. The second option would be a scrutiny committee of one of the 7 councils, either operating through that committee or a subcommittee. Now, just because it's a committee of one of the councils, that doesn't mean that it can only comprise members of that council. And again, we've got examples of that running in the county. For example, the Economic Growth Joint Scrutiny Committee is formally a committee of the county council, not a joint committee, nevertheless has membership from across. So that's the kind of beast we're talking about in option 2. Option 3, for the sake of completion, is that we just carry on with 7 separate councils, each scrutinising their own council's input into the process, and that's a perfectly valid model. I will just note under that while I say 7 councils, in fact it's 5, because 2 of our districts still operate a committee system and therefore don't have scrutiny. So there are all sorts of exceptions and complexities we're dealing with here, but you get what I'm proposing under 3. And then option 4 is a scrutiny panel, so not a formal committee, but a panel of one of the scrutiny committees. I won't keep you in suspense. It's option 4 that the presentation is recommending, but the next couple of slides will just talk you through the thought process that we've been through to land on that option. Before I go into that options appraisal, though, I would just say that the reason we're doing a tour of the scrutiny committees is both to get your input. So, we are recommending option 4, but I genuinely want to hear from each of the committees that we're visiting to understand whether you agree with that conclusion. It's not a foregone conclusion, but also within option 4, there's lots of room for us to adopt and adapt the way we want to work. So I'm also interested in hearing from you as to any thoughts and ideas that you've got as to how these arrangements could work effectively. With that, then, let's just go through those 4 options. The first would be a formal joint scrutiny committee. I won't read through the slide in detail because you've got access to it, but what I will do is highlight the key kind of points of differentiation, and in the case of options 1 to 3, why we've ruled them out in favour of option 4. So while this is this is probably the most formal footing that we could set the arrangements up on, that is also its downfall in that the more formal it is, the longer it's going to take to stand up. And in particular, because this option would be a joint committee formally, then it would require decisions by all of the councils that are entering into that to set up those joint arrangements, and that's inevitably going to slow it down. The other thing that's worth noting about this, because it's a joint committee, it would be bound by the political balance rules for the 7 councils combined. So in the same way that our police and crime panel has to have political apportionment on the basis of the sum total of all 7 of our councils, this would be governed by the same rules. And to illustrate what that means, I've put a table on the side there that sets out what percentage of seats would fall to each group, and if we had a committee of 15, how those seats would end up being proportioned. Now, the more observant amongst you will notice that the final column only adds up to 14, not 15. That's purely because of rounding. So inevitably, when you do things by percentage and in small numbers, you get some rounding errors. So effectively, there's one more seat that would fall to be allocated, and that would be a process of negotiation. But it serves to illustrate the point that that's the kind of balance of membership that you would be looking for. So we're not recommending this, partly because of the time it would take to stand up, partly because while political balance is important, when we're trying to get a balance politically, we're also trying to get a balance across 7 councils, and that could become quite difficult to navigate. We already have quite a convoluted process for appointing to the police and crime panel, where some members are there because they've been nominated by their authority and some are then topped up. That's not insurmountable, but it's not very flexible either. The other thing that we would have to think about were we standing up a formal joint scrutiny committee is the formal arrangements for supporting that committee, whether the chair would incur an allowance for that committee, and all those kind of factors. Option 2 is a slightly lighter touch version of that, which is a scrutiny committee which could be hosted by any one of the councils that's operating the cabinet and scrutiny model. And I would say at this point, as I did to my own home committee on Thursday, I recognise that with local government reorganisation, there is a danger that it's seen as a county takeover. I think the county council has said on numerous occasions that's not how we want it to look, that's not how we want it to feel, and that's not the intention. It's really important in terms of the future of the new council or councils that we all have an equal stake in that. And for that reason, I think any option that might see the county council hosting an arrangement that's a joint one runs that risk of being seen as part of that cultural takeover. That said, it wouldn't have to be the county council that hosted this committee. It could be any of the councils that has a scrutiny cabinet model. But whichever council it was, it would be that council whose political balance requirements we inherited, and that could get difficult. You can imagine the political balance at one extreme of Cheltenham, which has a very large majority by one party, and at the other extreme, Forest of Dean, where no party has overall control, gets you very different results. And while we could top up the membership of that committee, there's the danger that you create those members who are there by right and those who are there as top-up members. And again, that may not feel egalitarian. It may not feel that all councils have an equal stake. And I think above all things, that's what we want to avoid. The other factor of this is whichever council hosts it, the committee would inherit their rules, their procedures, their allowances. And again, that runs the risk of feeling more like that council has a higher stake in it than the other councils, and that's something we'd want to avoid. Option 3 on the next slide is the easiest one to explain, which is we all carry on doing what we're doing now, and each committee scrutinises its own council. And there are benefits to that. I mean, in terms of decision making, while we're in this first phase of local government reorganisation, any decisions that are made will be made by one of those 7 authorities, and therefore there is a logic that any scrutiny that happens should happen of one of those 7 authorities. But the reality is, while formal decision making will follow that rule, the actual day-to-day implementation of the programme is going to be and feel much more joined up and much more joint than that. And the reality is lots of the actions and activity will be shared activity across all 7 councils. Speaking purely selfishly, while I'm genuinely relishing the opportunity to do a tour of 7 committees as part of standing this up, if I have to spend the next 12 months doing that, then I suspect I'll spend the next 12 months doing little but that, and that's probably not in the interest of the programme either. So I think there are some definite downsides of sticking with the existing arrangements, not least of all, it'll create a certain amount of duplication, and it risks things falling between the cracks. Whenever you've got more than one body trying to do the same job, the danger is everybody else thinks somebody else has looked at it, and we don't want to run that risk with something as critical as local government reorganisation. In the interest of being completely open, though, the one advantage of this is that the call-in arrangements would be very, very clear. So you'll be familiar with call-in process for your own council. And under these arrangements, it's very clear that you'd be calling in decisions of your own executive, and the other councils would be calling in decisions of their own executive. And it's not that clear in the other models, but I'll come on to talk about why I don't think that should be a deciding factor in the option for the last slide. So we can just move on to that one. So the option we are proposing is that we set up a scrutiny panel. Now, I will become far more familiar in this role with all 7 of the council's constitutions. I'm not at that stage yet, but I know within the county council constitution, and I'm presuming within other councils' constitutions, there's provision for scrutiny panels to be set up by scrutiny committees, and that's the provision that we would propose to use. I think that's got a number of advantages over a formal scrutiny committee. The first is that it offers a degree of flexibility. So whereas if our council wanted to set up a scrutiny committee, that decision would have to go through Constitution Committee and then council as a whole, and therefore would take a while to do. In the county council's constitution, a scrutiny committee can set up a scrutiny panel very quickly, very easily, and without having to refer to any of those mechanisms. What that means is that scrutiny committee could just as easily vary, alter, adjust the terms of reference. I've just come hot on the heels from a session at Cotswold, the same session at Cotswold District Council, where some of the questions members had for me were around what each of the options would mean in terms of if we wanted to change the terms of reference. And I think that's one of the really strong selling points of this. Instead of another body, in the case of the example I've just given, the County Constitution Committee and County Council as a whole having to take the decisions about how the committee worked, in this instance, scrutiny itself holds those levers. And I think that's a significant advantage. The other thing that's more flexible in this option is the membership. Now, I'll come on in the next slide to put a proposal on the table as to how it could work, but the reality is we're not bound by political proportionality for a scrutiny panel, and that gives us more flexibility in terms of making sure there's not only cross-political representation, but also cross-county representation, because we are trying to balance those two things in this scenario. So it gives us more flexibility, it allows us to stand it up more quickly. What it doesn't do is give powers of call-in. But as I said at the beginning, the decisions, the big D decisions, the decisions that could be called in will all be made by individual councils anyway. So it doesn't prevent this committee, for example, calling in a decision that the executive's made in support of LGR, but it would be your executive's decision. So we don't lose anything under this scenario. It just means that those call-in functions remain separate functions rather than shared functions. I think the other advantage of a scrutiny panel is it gives much more flexibility over ways of working. Committee meetings like this are valuable, they're really important, and they very importantly deliver transparency to the public. And I wouldn't want to lose that, and a panel will be able to meet in that format so that it's fulfilling that expectation of public scrutiny, of public transparency, but it would be able to meet in other more flexible ways. And with a programme as complicated and complex as local government reorganisation, we're already finding within the programme team, you want to be able to operate in different ways for different tasks. So there is a place for formal meetings where decisions are made. There's also a place for more workshopy approaches to really get underneath the skin of certain issues. And with a scrutiny panel, we'd be able to vary your approach, be able to meet in public, as often as the panel wished to meet in public. There would be no loss of transparency, but it would also be able to meet in less formal ways if that was what the panel collectively thought would be useful. All of those sorts of things can be tied up in the formation of the terms of reference. So just to move on beyond the four options, I said that we've put on the table a proposed membership for a panel, were that to be the supported option. And I've done this purely on the basis of showing how it might work. This would all have to be worked through once we'd decided this was the option and decided how it would be set up. But But what I've worked through here is a scenario where each council was asked to nominate 2 members onto the panel, one from its biggest political group and one from its second biggest political group. And if we were to do that the membership on the right-hand side is the result. Purely by coincidence, but it's a helpful coincidence, that isn't a million miles away from political balance. So although that's not a requirement, it does get you close to a defensible position where each political group can see that it's getting what it might regard as a fair share of the places. But just to remind you, we wouldn't need to be restricted by that, so there would be facility to expand the membership if, having asked people to do that, we still didn't feel we had quite the right mixture of place and politics around the table. The other thing I'd note is that while I've worked that up as a proposal, I think all 7 councils would say back to me, well, hang on, it's not the county's job to tell us who we nominate. So while we might make a request that each council nominates from its 2 biggest groups, you wouldn't be bound by that, and I wouldn't try and impose that on you. It would be this council's decision who it nominated onto this group. So we could end up with something that doesn't look like political balance, and then we might want that facility to be able to add additional places and additional seats on the panel to address any gaps that leaves. Before I hand over to hear your views on what we're suggesting, just the final slide just talks through the next steps. So the first step that we've already completed was we tested out these arrangements with the chief executive and then with their leaders through the programme arrangements. And I'm pleased to be able to say that all 7 councils were supportive of that from an executive point of view. The second step is now bringing that round the scrutiny committees or equivalent, nearest equivalent where they don't exist, of each of the 7 councils. So we did County Council last week, City Council and Cotswold District Council tonight. And while I'm sat here, my colleague Alice McAlpine, who some of you will remember because she served here as your monitoring officer for a while, Alice is in Cheltenham Borough Council running through the same set of slides and taking their feedback. Within the next 2 weeks, we'll have completed the cycle of those remaining councils. And as I say, I'm enjoying this tour and seeing how different councils operate culturally and formally. And what I've discovered is that after 10 years of training myself to hit the right-hand button on one of these things, when you get to Cotswold, you need to retrain yourself to hit the left-hand button because their system is set up completely differently. It was a real penny drops moment when I realised why all those district councillors that find themselves elected to the county council from the Cotswolds struggle for the first 3 or 4 council meetings. So it was nice to put myself in their shoes. But more seriously, you know, we are 7 different organisations. While we've got a lot in common, we've also got our own cultures, and actually one of the really exciting things about being responsible for the governance and legal work stream is you get the opportunity to find out more about those cultures and to think about how we can adopt the best of all of those arrangements into the new council or councils going forward. So I'm very much here, ears open, wanting your views and ideas so that we can really use that to shape these arrangements going forward. And with that, I will close and leave you to answer questions and comments. Thank you, Chair.
Well, that's amazing. So questions, please, comments? Anne.
Thank you, Chair. What's the function of this committee? What do you expect it to actually do?
Broadly speaking, 2 things. One, to hold those of us who are delivering the portfolio of programme activity to account. There will be a huge amount of that. It will be moving very, very quickly, and those of us who are involved in it will be involved in it up to here. And I think there's a real danger that we lose perspective. Having an outside, slightly more distant body from it, holding us to account, challenging our thinking, making sure we're not missing anything, feeding back to us if it is started to feel like a takeover or anything, anything of that sort, I think will be enormously valuable. The second thing we want is help in shaping that future local government reform. Again, because of the pace it's moving, it could become quite insular. It could become the baby of a very limited group of people. And I think it's absolutely imperative on all of us that we broaden that ownership out as wide as we possibly can. This won't be the only way that we do that, but it's a really important way that we do that. In our scrutiny committee last week, I was talking about some of the other ways in my work stream that we'll want to involve members. I mean, they're one of the things that will sit within my area is the constitutions of the new councils. I'm sure that's a space that we'll want to involve and engage. We'll need to involve and engage members because they are your constitutions. So this won't be the only opportunity, but I am seeing it as a real opportunity to broaden the ownership of the whole of the local government reorganisation programme, because at the end of the day, these will be your councils. If I'm fortunate enough to still have a job in one of the new councils, then I will be an officer of those councils, but you are the members of those councils. They will be your councils, and it's really important that you're shaping them.
Thank you for the answer.
So we're looking at, excuse me, so Karen, you indicated to speak, and then who was it?
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
I just wondered how we're going to make the decision as to which one of these options to go for, albeit that obviously you've recommended option 4 because you've got X number of councils and 4 options. What if we all want something different?
If you all want something different, then that will be challenging. But of course, all of this will be done by consent. So if we did end up with a scenario where, well, I've already done 3 councils, so let's assume those 3 are on board because that was their feedback. If those 3 councils were the only ones that supported this, then there would be nothing to stop those 3 councils forming joint scrutiny arrangements. The rest, we wouldn't try and we wouldn't be able to impose that on you. And therefore you would carry on scrutinising your own council's input into it. And we would obviously respect that, work with you to do that. This is both the beauty and the challenge of where we are at the moment. We have 7 sovereign organisations who at some point in the future will either willingly or unwillingly be forced to converge. But until that point, we are 7 separate organisations, and we must respect that. We forget that at our peril. It's why we're putting work into building as much consensus as possible. But if that consensus isn't there, then we will find ways of working without it. Simple as that. In terms of the formal decision making, if this is option 4, we effectively only need a decision of any one of the 7 councils to set up a panel and to invite other members onto it. And at that point, your decision becomes, do we join it or not? Slightly different way of framing it, but that's probably the reality. Is if several of the councils felt that was the way forward, we wouldn't need all 7 councils on board to form a panel. We would just need one to say, this is what we're going to do, will you join us on it? And then I guess if the balance of risk shifts slightly, it means that you don't have to join it, but if you chose not to, you may miss out on some of the opportunities that presents, but that's effectively the choice that you would be facing at the time.
Thank you. My word, this sounds very complex. Thank you. I mean, until we know which structure or which council the government has selected, which will be in the summer, it's difficult, I guess, to actually start to scrutinise, or is it? And building on the question that Anne raised, scrutiny of what? Are we looking at scrutinising the process leading from where we are now as 7 councils into 1? I guess that's one thing. But also we're scrutinising a proposed structure of whatever the new authority might look at as well. Am I correct in my thinking there? It may well be that others might be thinking the same. I don't know, because it's really good to look at, which option, but exactly what is it that we're being asked to scrutinise.
So what you're being asked to scrutinise at this stage is the shared activity of 7 councils working together. Now, it's similar to the answer I've just given. They're doing that at this stage voluntarily. Nobody can force any one of the other councils to join into those programme arrangements, but we've agreed that as 7 councils, that's what we want to do. And so it's a mechanism for holding those 7 councils to account collectively. Are we doing the things that we believe will get us set up as a new authority or authorities within the required timelines? Are we delivering those plans in such a way that achieve the visions and ambitions we've set out in our various business cases? When we're talking about things like neighbourhood working, are we delivering that and shaping that in a way that will work for 7 different parts of the county and in the interests of 7 different communities? More than 7 different communities, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. I think in terms of whether it's 1 or 2 that government eventually opts for in the summer, I think even beyond that point, we will still have a huge amount of joint activity to undertake, and these arrangements would probably need to continue beyond that as a single scrutiny function, regardless of whether there's 1 council or 2 being formed. And the reason I say that is because if it is 2, then a huge amount of activity will come out of the need to disaggregate county council services. And until the point at which we've got clearer plans for how we're going to do that and what the new structures might look like, it probably makes sense to scrutinise that as a single process, not as 2 halves. Now, there will become a point where, if there are 2 unitary authorities, they'll each want their scrutiny arrangements stood up. I think the point of that is likely to be the point at which the elections have taken place and you actually have members of those 2 authorities in May 27, albeit in shadow form. But that's only my kind of broad thinking at this stage. I would absolutely agree it's very complicated.
Yeah, because if it's 1, I understand that. But if it is 2, a Greater Gloucester and the donut around the outside, or the East and West, then surely would it not be for the constituents? Well, say it was an East and West, would it not be appropriate for Stroud, Gloucester and the Forest, for example, to be that scrutiny? I'm just trying to get my head around that and try and understand quite exactly how this complexity is going to work.
Yeah, and at some point in this process between now and May 2028, we will stop feeling like 7 separate organisations and start feeling more like 1 or 2. I don't think we're at that point yet, but it's part of why I think flexibility is important, because I think we need to spot that point when it occurs. Thinking ahead, though, what we're trying to set up at this stage is not something that will scrutinise the 2 new authorities, because when they come into being, it'll be for them to set up their own scrutiny arrangements. And it's how the 7 of us collectively in our current forms are contributing to that process. So I'm thinking of it not as the precursor to a new unitary authority, so much as scrutiny of 7 separate organisations moving towards that point and that place. Because at the moment, it is those 7 authorities that separately have that responsibility for preparing for that.
Yeah, I think kind of going on from a lot of what Terry's said, I think it's too early to kind of know what structure we'd really kind of want, because if we're talking about, say, 1 or 2 people from each authority, if there's decisions that are, say, very Gloucester-centric or very Cotswold-centric, the people on that new committee might have not really much knowledge about Cotswold. Or similarly, if it's something that's very county, you can have two people that are county councillors, unless you're getting double hatters from all the other authorities, a lot of other people will be going, what on earth is all of this? I feel like until we kind of have more of a direction from government of it's going to be one mega council, or it's going to be an east-west split, or it's going to be a Greater Gloucester, or what have you, there's almost not really the kind of core value in there of setting something up, because we don't know what we're setting it up for yet. It feels to me as though like option 3, where we all continue with, we're all doing our own work, we all know our authorities well, and with LGR that's new, and there's going to be cross things going on that we don't quite know. But until we get a point of, say if it's east-west split, I hope it's not, but say if it is, then it might be something that Stroud, Gloucester and the Forest, his respective committees, look to get together and join that up. And then, because obviously this is going to be a lot of extra work, for us, if there's something going on in Cotswold, Cheltenham, Tewkesbury, for instance, in east-west split model, we don't want to be spending our time and energy looking at something that's going to have absolutely no impact over here. I know you said about, obviously there's that crossover with county that's going to have to be split. If there is a two authority split, that's kind of, we've got two separate new authorities. It's then for county to support getting their services into those two authorities. So if one's moving faster than the other, there's going to be a split in county anyway. It's not going to both perfectly go in tandem into both authorities. So it feels like there's going to be a lot of duplication, and we just can't, we don't really know.
Sorry to interrupt you, but just conscious of time. Can we give Rob the opportunity to comment on what you said so far? Do you mind? Thanks.
Excuse me. You're absolutely right. I mean, at this stage, there is as much that's unclear as there is that's clear, and I don't deny that. I did want to be very specific that what we're talking about here is not replacing any existing scrutiny at the moment. This is additional to existing scrutiny, so trying to find an effective way of providing some additionality without removing anything we've got at the moment. So I did want that to be really clear. I think the reality is, though, while most of the big decisions will be made post that government decision, there is work already happening. And the reason it's already happening is because we don't think there'll be time to do everything the other side of that decision. So the sorts of things we're already starting to look at and will be standing up are things like that constitution working group, where we'll need to start to draft those constitutions. Now, those constitutions won't be agreed until there's two or one new council in place to agree them. But that council isn't going to be in a position to come in on day one and completely rewrite it, because the business of writing a constitution takes several months. So all the way through that process, the danger is, without any kind of wider political ownership and oversight, the only people that will have involvement and oversight in that is the large and growing team of officers and the 7 council leaders, who will be quite stretched to keep their heads over all that. So I think there is something for me about how do we ensure there are those political fingerprints over each stage. I'm not saying that's impossible to do within the existing arrangements, but I do think it carries a greater risk that, bluntly, officers get on with what officers do when there's not politicians holding them to account. So I think it does increase that risk that we do what we think is the right thing, but without that political oversight and ownership from those of you who've been elected to represent your communities. And I think it's exactly because you will come with that mindset and that insight into what's in the best interest of your communities that we need that input, even at this very early stage. The other thing is we are setting up a significant machinery to implement this. So we've already appointed 11 programme sponsors into my role, 11 programme leads working one in each of the work streams, supported by 11 programme managers. Now, because that's been a competitive recruitment process, it's partly in the lap of the gods which parent authority we've come from. So Gloucester City does have people in those roles, County Council has people in those roles. Forest of Dean District Council doesn't, just because none of their officers came forward and were appointed into those roles. That may change as we broaden out. But again, because we haven't got balance, we haven't attempted to have balance in terms of where officers serving within that project team are from, there is a danger that we're busy building a new council based on the experience of a bunch of people, none of whom have worked in Gloucester City Council, for example. That isn't the case, but I'm illustrating the point. So again, I think because the political ownership will, by its definition, try to be representative of the county as a whole, it is quite valuable to have that in place at the first possible opportunity. But I do accept the point that at the moment it's going to feel a little bit woolly and a little bit difficult. Equally, I think the point at which it stops being woolly and starts being very real could come on us very quickly, and I don't want to run the risk of leaving you behind.
And so I guess, so county proposed the single authority. We know Cheltenham proposed the east-west split and Gloucester's proposing the Greater Gloucester model. Is it not really for those authorities to be doing the prep work for that, and as the sponsor of that particular proposal be putting forward that kind of work? It may be, like you say, you're a programme sponsor for a particular area, but would that not be something that would be owned by the council that's owning that proposal until the point that the decision is made, and then you feed into, say, this scrutiny here, you're doing some work for this council's proposal, would come to this scrutiny and we could scrutinise the work you're doing on behalf of this council's proposal? I'm just wondering, because it just feels like there's so much going on. And also another thing I'm quite concerned about is that county is obviously much larger authority. You've got people there that are professionals, politicians that do it day in, day out. A lot of us have day jobs. So when is this going to be held? Is it going to be daytime? Is it going to be evening? How are you going to blend that across all 7 authorities that hold meetings in very, very different ways? It just feels like it just makes much more sense for the councils that are proposing a particular solution to be behind it and working on that until such a point that government makes a decision and then everyone gets behind whatever it is at that point with the prep work that's been done until then.
Okay, so Rob, when you reply, if you can cover off those points, but also if you can tell us what you want from us today. Do you want us to take a vote on the 4 options and start thinking about which lanes we're going to put in and how many? Leader's starting to look a bit anxious, so maybe he's got other ideas. In all seriousness, Leader, do you want to contribute on that, how you see us going forward, whether we put forward, which option this committee does, or do you have another way of doing it that you prefer?
Well, it's really up to the committee to decide what his view is on these things. So I wouldn't want to interfere on that. But the 7 leaders came to a sort of a collective decision that option 4 was probably the best one and easiest one to implement. But that's not for me to decide what you decide. But the likelihood there will be 1 Lib Dem and 1 Conservative member sitting on that option 4 committee or whatever it will be called.
Okay, thanks for that, Steve.
From this council, I think that's how it will work, isn't it, Rob?
Okay, thank you. Rob, do you want to comment? Just conscious of time, everybody. We've got I'm very reluctant to urge the County Council's monitoring officer to be brief, but we have 2 really seriously weighty items to follow, Rob. If you can bear with us, please, and we do take these seriously. Don't don't imply from what I've just said that we don't. Thanks.
So in terms of what I'd like from you today, a view as to which of the options would be your preferred option, or if it isn't a consensus, I'm equally happy to feed back in, that actually it's between option 3 or 4 for us. But just to note that because we're working across 7 councils, just because it's not your preferred option doesn't mean it's not the one that the other 6 will go for. And that's not the end of the world either. So you can say option 4 isn't the one we like best. And if the rest of the councils set up option 4, still join option 4. There's no penalty, there's no jeopardy in that decision for you. I'm also keen to take on board, as I said, other feedback as to what would make it work for you. One of the issues I'll take away from this discussion is that thing about timing it and actually how we're going to make it. Just on the specific question about doesn't it make sense to scrutinise what our council is doing in respect of its preferred option? I can only speak from a county council point of view, but I couldn't recommend to my council that that's what they do, simply from the point of view of the implications for us of 2 unitary authorities is that there's a huge amount more work to be done in disaggregating county services that doesn't have to occur in the 1 unitary authority world. So if we were just making preparations for the horse that we backed, I'll put it like that, that's a relatively simple task for the county council. It's about how it accommodates and works with existing district council services and helps districts bring them together. The job of how it separates its services into 2 different authorities, be that East West or Greater Gloucester and the rest of the county, is absolutely massive. And if we weren't thinking about that at this stage, I would be really, really worried. And our cabinet has been very, very clear that it doesn't want officers to wait until it knows which option government's chosen to prepare for that, because all options have to be deliverable, and we need to know that all options are going to be deliverable. So from my point of view, it's really important we get on with that piece of work within the county council, and that we invite scrutiny into how we're preparing for that piece of work, because at the moment, our 55 county councillors are the ones who are responsible for the health and well-being of children and young people, for example, in the county. And if they're not checking that decisions that might be made a year down the line by government, that we're not going to be ready for those, then they're not doing their job today, let alone in a year's time. So I think we do have to encourage them to do that work. The dynamics will be different for you, because the difference between 1 UA and 2 UA probably isn't as stark. But that's the way I'm looking at it and thinking about it.
Okay, so I'm really keen to move on now. So we've heard what the preferred option is, and now I'll take you in a sec, don't worry. The preferred option is the 4th option, which we talked about in the pre-meeting. So just take Anne, and then we'll put that one to the vote. We'll see where we get with that, okay? So, Anne, you've got the last word.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at this, I accept we've got a lot of Rumsfeldian logic, haven't we? We've got the known unknowns, the known unknowns, and the known known knowns, and all of that mussy fuzziness. So we can't have something which is clear. And in the answer that you gave to my first question, that came across. We don't know what we're dealing with. We've just got to get ready for uncertainty. So I'm thinking that one of the things we need to try and do is build in flexibility. So if we start off with something, that thing can then split once we get an answer. If it needs to change, it can become something different. But we've got some work done already. We've got some things happened. I think we also, as a committee, we can't outsource our scrutiny. We can't pass it on to anybody else. It's ours. We've got to do it. And so I like the fact that the option 4, it still rests with us to do our scrutiny. But I think we have to acknowledge there'd have to be a bit of double duty. So whatever happens with, scrutiny outside of this committee, it has to feed back to this committee. There still has to be work done by this committee. Everything we do costs our time and costs officer time. And that's the same across all the councils. So there is efficiency. There's a bang for your buck cost saving doing certain things together, but we still have to do we have to mark our own homework. So I think as long as we acknowledge that, and I think your point about culture, which you addressed beautifully, and which side do you press? Each of the councils has its own culture and its own ways of doing and being, And if we don't have a voice, if we don't actually try and get out there, we're letting that culture not be represented in whatever's going forward. So I was very concerned that there are no officers from the Forest of Dean in your that wider working group, because the cultures and the ways of doing of the forest aren't naturally being represented. So I think it would be worthwhile taking part, but also keeping mindful that everything we do, there is a cost, and that should change and shift. Thank you, Chair.
And I think we've got total agreement with that. So moving on from that, can I ask the committee to put their hands up to vote on the option 4 as the way forward? Okay, there's quite a few. Somebody help me count up. That's virtually unanimous, I think. Okay, you got that? Okay, those against option 4, one, and any abstentions? 1. Okay, so Rob, we've delivered you option 4. So in terms of our role, that's it. And we, looking at the leader, we'll get the groups to feed in their names. Is that right? It's not listening. So, but yeah, Rob. Yep.
Yeah, so in terms of next steps, the next decision we'll have to make, if option 4 is supported universally, is who's going to host it. That's going to be an interesting process. I suspect what we'll do is we'll ask chief execs to let us know if their scrutiny committee is interested in setting it up, and if we end up with more than one option, we will need some kind of process to whittle that down. At that point, that council will need to take responsibility for setting it up, and will then write out to this council to say who your 2 nominations going to be, assuming it is 2. And then you'll follow whatever process you usually follow for appointments to outside bodies or joint bodies.
Okay, so thank you. That wraps it up really neatly. That's as far as we can go this evening. So Rob, thanks for your patience. Thanks for your patience, particularly answering some detailed questions. And we'll move on with the rest of the agenda. You're welcome to stay, but I'm sure you've got more pressing things to do. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the chance to meet you all.
That's cool. Thanks, Rob. And so over to the agenda car parking review. That's Jane and the deputy leader, I think. Please. So, Declan and Jane, thank you for coming. It's coming up to 8:10 now, and we've still got to do the financial report. Just a couple of bullet points, Declan, from you, if you're able to, please. Just a couple.
Can I just ask your indulgence very, very quickly on the forensic accountants issue? I tried to stick my hand up, but I think Terry wasn't in the way, and you didn't. That's all right. But this is literally only a few hours old, so I'll just very quickly explain. It'll only take a few minutes. The letter, the EFS letter that we got last week from Alison McGovern MP, she actually says, and I'll just quickly quote her from it, she said, in order for the department to provide a final capitalisation direction, the council is required to undergo an external assurance review, which will include, but will not be limited to, an assessment of the council's financial position and governance arrangements. She also goes on to say, I have significant concerns over the council's wider position. In particular, I have noticed historical financial governance issues attributed to a cyber attack in 2021. She also raises concerns about the statutory recommendations and the failure to produce accounts. But she then goes on to say, the department intends to proceed quickly with the external assurance review and will include close scrutiny of the issues above and the council's plans to address them. We will work with the councils on how best we can support them through these reviews. Now, what they've made clear is that they've considered us a priority, and we understand this will be funded by the government, which was always my issue. So that means that's no longer a concern. They want it to happen in the spring. And this afternoon, SIPA have been in contact with us, and they're also in talks with MHCLG. So from what I can see from all of this is that there will be a sort of review or financial audit of our governance issues relating to the years of the cyber attack and afterwards. And I think that probably addresses the concerns that the committee had.
Well, in as much as what you've read there addresses it, but the details always in what you haven't told us, and I'm not implying that you've withheld stuff. Can you send that email on to all committee members, please?
I can send you a copy of the letter because I think Steph already has a copy of it.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I can send you it. Steph already has a copy,
Okay.
but I can send it to yourself, and then if you want to distribute it.
Well, I'm sure the committee would like to see it, would we?
Yeah, don't have a problem with that. That's fine. We'll do that.
It's okay, but thank you for that. That was, that was interesting and helpful potentially. Thank you so much. But if you can still keep it just to 2 bullet points, please, that'd be really good.
Oh God, there's more than 2 bullet points here. Right, okay, the car parking review. Very basically, why we need to look at this is that, as you all probably know, the costs are rising of running our car parks is rising faster than the income. We have current operational constraints in outdated parking orders. Some of the issues, increasing antisocial behaviour, and we also need to look forward to regeneration demand, things like EV transitions and things like that. So those are what we need to look to in the future. So what we're proposing is to consolidate modernise the parking orders that we have, because they haven't been changed for many years. Enable improvements such as installing EV instruction. Introduce evening charging to enable us to make the car parks more hospitable and safer. Potentially provide residential permits which align with the county council system and move to a full management contract. So what we want to achieve from this, just the last few bullet points, is to stabilise the maintenance and security on a more proactive rather than reactive basis, secure contract certainty, help drive the nighttime economy by keeping King's Walk and Eastgate car parks open, and improving the state of our car parks, making them safer and cleaner and thus more appealing to users. And that was my summary.
That's really good. You can come again. So can I just open it to questions and comments, please? Questions and comments? Declan. So Anne, yep, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I was intrigued. You're talking about sort of 3.4, taxi drop-off points, private hire, sort of vehicle drop-off points. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And so you made a reference in terms of accessibility. Would we generate any income from that? Would there be any costs associated with that?
Missed the page where 2.4 is on, so Jane's going to answer that.
That was in consultation with our licensing team, feedback from predominantly private hire drivers. The Hackney carriage drivers get a pointed rank on highways from highways, and there's a brand new one around at the forum, which is very successful. However, feedback is that private hire drivers do sometimes struggle with where they can pick up from. So, for example, if you were shopping in Eastgate Market, if you wanted a taxi, that you'd have to go all the way around to the forum, which is not all that accessible if you're a wheelchair user or you're impaired. Whereas if we allow them access, then they can go up in the lift to a designated point and call their taxi from the company from there. It just allows for that flexibility and stops the intention is to help stop the pickups on the side of the road that shouldn't be happening, makes it safer, more accessible, and it generally is intended to help the economy and people's accessibility to those services.
Thank you for the answer. I sit on licensing, and we've had a few occasions where there's been confusion about who can and cannot go to certain areas. So it's good that it would be for all hire type vehicles to try and sort of support with that. But again, would it cost us anything? Would it earn us anything?
We can investigate that. In some private locations, you can charge an access fee, like the train station, for example. You have to pay for a permit to operate from the train station. So we can investigate in putting it into the orders that can be included, and then the choice can be made by the licensing committee whether to take that forward. I would advocate for that because that's additional income for the additional wear and tear for the car parks. But we need it in the orders first so that you, as the licensing committee, can then make that decision.
Lovely, thank you. And very quickly, Chair, and then I shall stop. I've always been annoyed when I am in the King's Walk car park that it's not very easy to come down to street level. So if you're going backwards towards King Square, there's the ways to do that. But if I want to come forward towards the shopping areas, I tend to just go through the Guildhall and come out that way. Is there any cost-effective way of making it easier to come directly down onto street level instead of having to go back to King Square and then out again?
I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure where you mean, because the lift from King's Walk takes you down to the King's Walk shopping centre.
I'll explain the car park I'm talking about and where I am, because I'm probably not making it very clear. But I've never found this an easy way to go forwards to the shops. If you're going down and into sort of towards the King Square area, you can do that. But it's very frustrating when you want to go in the opposite direction that you have to go back on yourself and round. But thank you. I'm probably the only one in the room on that, but thank you.
Okay, Terry Pullen.
Thank you, Chair. As I understand it, our car parks at the moment, after 6 o'clock, are either free to park in or they're closed. I mean, I know Lady Belgate Street is closed. Sorry, not Lady Belgate, Longsmith Street. But all other surface car parks are open, remain open, but I believe that the charges cease at 6 o'clock. So what I'm hearing is that you want to introduce a parking charge for those car parks after 6 o'clock. What worries me is we need to be generating income into the nighttime economy, and by putting charges in place, that is going to have a negative effect on our nighttime economy. I think Southgate Moorings, I looked earlier, charged £2.10. That's for the whole evening, I guess. So, I mean, whilst I'd be opposed to evening charges, if you did, would that be a flat rate for evening charges, or an existent, or carrying on the daytime rate? As I said, on the surmise, though, that I'm not happy with introducing even car parking charges for the evening. And I do have a second question, Chair.
My understanding is that would be the point. It would be. That's the intention at the minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole idea behind this is that we want really all the car parks to be open at night time, but we've got a problem with, in particular, Eastgate and King's Walk, this antisocial behaviour. And every time something happens, we have to spend money on an ad hoc basis cleaning it all up. If we can keep them open at night time and get in extra money from the people using those car parks, then we can keep those car parks in a better condition and make them more appealing. Because right now, I wouldn't particularly fancy, well, Eastgate closes, of course, and King's Walk, but they're not the nicest. We need to spend a lot of money keeping them acceptable, and the only way we can do that is with the evening charging. Southgate Moorings has had evening charging for years now, I think since 2009, and it's one of our most popular car parks. In fact, it is our most popular, and it's well kept. And I would want to see other car parks kept to that standard. And the whole issue as well regarding the parking orders, we want to bring all the car parks into those so we can deal with issues like Synnott Street, which Saj has brought up in
previous occasions, rather than it is difficult to take action against people who are abusing those sorts of car parks when they're not part of the parking orders. So that's why we want to bring them all under one and make it easier to do it in the future. So we're sort of, it's a big sort of project that happens in stages, and changing the parking orders is the first one.
Hands going up. So Terry, and then it's Alwyn, then it's Sarge, then it's Victoria. Yep.
Thanks. Not forgetting that, of course, Southgate moorings principally feed the docks and the quays, whereas we're trying to talk about encouraging the nighttime economy in the city centre. Anyway, my second point was you talked about parking permits in residential areas. Now, in my ward, as Councillor Tree Chambers Debuse will know, we have a number of car parks, and particularly we have two in Alma Place, Alma Place and Alma Terrace. And you indeed, Sarge, have got Synop Street and others. Yeah. We're not talking about introducing permits for those car parks, are we?
Wrong button. No, so I'll reference your Southgate moorings point about feeding the docks. The charges, I was actually the one who introduced those charges at a time as the development was coming to an end and the nighttime economy was just starting. And that's the same intention here, is to align it. The evening charges were brought in as a flat charge to help with generating the extra security. That car park, as Declan says, is our most successful car park, not just because of the income on a space per space basis it generates, but also in terms of the very low level of complaints we get, the user activity. So the intention is to time it so that it doesn't discourage the evening economy just as we're getting off to a good start with the forum completion and everything else. We have to time it right for all of those things. And now is the time to do that whilst we're trying to encourage that, so that it's not a new charge later down the line. And the intention of this is to ensure that we have the correct management processes in place so that all of those improvements can take place, so that the user experience is as good as it can be, which encourages the nighttime economy, which was what we found with Southgate moorings throughout the time when I was working for the South West RDA. With your reference to the residence permits, the intention for that is for the city centre car parks, and it is intended to align with the county council permit system, so you would need to live in the area. It was not intended to charge for example, the Synop Street car park, and your one obviously in Alma Place. But the intention of pulling everything together under one umbrella is so that the enforcement contract that we would have would enable us to enforce rules in those car parks. For example, obviously, Saj, we've had the conversation, haven't we, about there was a... yeah, but so the intention is so that we can enforce that through the contract and the regime, as opposed to other legislation that we might have to deal with, which does take longer. So it is intended to improve the user experience, not levy a charge on those ones.
Thank you, Chair. I note that for environmental reasons, we want to introduce more electric vehicle charging. Now, obviously, if we're going to look at environmental things, we should also be looking at congestion on the roads. And indeed, the County Council has improved the cycling facilities into the city considerably and is continuing to do so. But we have very poor, safe, secure cycling parking places in the city. So I would like to see, particularly in the open air car parks, something that is good for cyclists, so that people who come in with an e-bike or even their £50 bike, but if that's the only transport they have, it's of considerable value to them, somewhere safe for them to park. That may be at a cost to those individuals, but I'm sure that people would value that, because leaving your bike in the middle of Gloucester at the moment is something that I choose not to do, which is why I often have a fold-up I can carry it around with me.
We can certainly take that on board. I think it's a very good idea.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back on Councillor Pullen's point, because paragraph 3.6, the way I interpreted it, concerned me deeply. So can I just have it on record then, that there are no plans to introduce resident permit parking charges in any of those free car parks, such as in Sinope Street, off the High Street, in my ward, in Armour Place and Armour Terrace and other areas. And also, are you able to confirm how many free car parks there are at the moment in the city? Would you be able to?
I think there are 6 free car parks in the city, but I can get those details for you, and we can converse on email.
And then with my question about the resident permit parking, there are no plans to introduce any charges to residents in those free car parks. Is that what you're saying?
There's no plan certainly in Sinope Street that I'm aware of. And I'm not sure, or is it?
No, not in the ones in the.
Yeah.
No, that was, we can make an amendment in the paper to reflect the list.
Yeah.
It was just the paragraph or the sentence that reads in paragraph 3.6. The proposal is to include all of these all of these car parks into the consolidation so that the income from parking can be used to maintain them. So
Yeah, well, what that means is that if they're part of the same parking order, they can be part of the same maintenance contract. So therefore, whoever it is that we would award the contract to, they would be also responsible for doing the repairs in those car parks as well, which is not the case at the minute. So that's why we need to change the parking order.
well, that'd be fantastic. Really appreciate it, because we've had some ongoing issues, as you're aware, in the Sinope Street car park that you touched on. So that'd be welcome news for my constituents. Thank you very much.
Hello, mine is just a clarification. Terry gave you an option of 1 or 2 things, and technically you didn't actually give an answer that I heard, but I am hard of hearing, so I might not have missed it. He asked that when the nighttime charges came in, would they be a flat rate like they are at the docks, I gather, or would they carry on with the charging system throughout the day, but go on? So, thank you.
Flat rate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered whether you can elaborate a little bit on how the residence permit system will work, because I read in the papers that members of the public would still be able to park in those car park areas. Does it mean that residents will be guaranteed a space? Because I know that was one of the complaints we had about other permit schemes within the city, that although they paid, they weren't actually guaranteed anywhere to park.
So the intention is to model it very similar to the county permits, which means it's the first come, first served basis. Our intention is to price them fairly low at the outset, so that isn't so you're not paying for something you're not able to use in that same way. I know there has been some issues with the prices. I don't know the details with the county permits, but it would align with that. But we would keep it very low. The aim would be just to cover our costs. We would have one permit. You'd have to prove you live in the area. So if you wanted to park in Station Road, you'd have to prove you lived within that square. And then the second person would have a reduction. So it would be a price for permit number 1 and a lower price for permit number 2. But you'd have to prove that you live in the area, and it would be a maximum of 2 permits per household, so that we could try and limit people paying for something they're not going to receive. That's the proposal at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. I note you're talking about EVs and installing charging points. It makes me think about the size of vehicles that are coming into our car parks. And sometimes our car parks aren't really meant for the size of some of the vehicles that are coming in. And I often feel quite squished between the very large vehicles. Is there any powers that you have to try and restrict the size of the vehicles coming in, to try and sort of make better use of the spaces that are there? And in terms of the parking permits that are coming in, this may be something that's completely unworkable, but is there any way to prioritise smaller vehicles? Because of course they take up less space, and that means that there's more general room in the city for more vehicles instead of very, very large vehicles that can sometimes take up the space, well, it feels like the space of two.
So part of the infrastructure review that we've carried out in terms of what we are going to need to spend on our car parks does actually include ensuring every single surface car park, every space meets the BPA standards for the current size of vehicles. There are two different sizes, one aimed for a car and one aimed for a van, for example. And that is the intention, that every car park would be reviewed and any resurfacing and white lining is done so that the correct sizes are in place, so that we don't have to limit in terms of it being, say, a 4x4. But obviously, if it was a longer van, then for Westgate car park, for example, there is an option on the machine where you can purchase 2 spaces if you're an oversized vehicle. And it's just that we would make sure that we have the infrastructure in place over the course of, it would take several years, obviously, to do them in stages. But that was included as part of the costings for what we need to spend over a 3-year period.
Thank you, that's very helpful. So potentially we would lose some capacity to accommodate larger vehicles as those sizes are generally increasing. Thank you.
Liam and then Sarge. Oh, hang about, sorry, it's 8:30, magical hour. So we have to take a vote on whether or not we go on for beyond the 2-hour limit. So I'm absolutely going to recommend from the chair that we continue for another however long it takes. Beyond 8:30. If it's just me, then I'm like Felino makes and we're all going home. So if you're content to continue to carry on with the meeting, please show.
Subject to comfort, Brian.
That's much better. Thank you so much. You've got that, Lauren? Yeah, thank you. Okay, who did I call? Liam.
Yeah, just kind of carrying on from Anne's point. I know some councils around the country I've seen have banned certain vehicles from entering their car parks due to weight or length or some modern large cars that you wouldn't necessarily expect. That's not a van, it's fine, but it's just those cars are too big. Is there provisions within here to, I think it wasn't quite answered of Anne's question of how can we control and restrict vehicles that might be too large entering? So say one of our multi-stories, for instance, if we have 100 big heavy EVs going, that's going to be very different from 50 years ago when we might have had 50 Mini Coopers. Is there work around that to ensure that they are safe for modern vehicles and we can limit what kind of vehicles we do accept into them?
Yes, so before we do that, there would be structural load testing done of all the areas to ensure their suitability, as well as the capacity for the power to ensure that there is sufficient capacity within the grid to power what needs to go through there, and all that was included in the costings.
So bearing in mind, this report is coming on to Cabinet. So are there any recommendations that we want to add to ask Cabinet to consider when they look at this when is it, next week? Next week. Because this is our opportunity, obviously, to influence the report and the impact it may or may not have on Cabinet. So, Sarge.
Chair, I do have a recommendation. I just, somebody already mentioned about the evening parking. I think that's mad. I think that would be the final nail in the coffin for the city centre. I've been in the evenings for a walk in town on Fridays and Saturday evenings, and it's like a ghost town. And by increasing parking, it's going to be the end of it. And I just think that would be the wrong thing to do at the wrong time. Let's put the residents and businesses first for once, not at the expense of ourselves. And let's put revenue second, because I just think that's what we need to do. If I went into the town centre in the evening, I could park on a single yellow line for free. I could park on a single yellow line by Gloucester Docks for free. it's a no-brainer where somebody would go. So I just think, look, we're already increasing parking charges during the daytime. We're already increasing other charges. Council tax has gone up. Fuel prices are going to go up again soon. Food prices have gone up. We just keep ripping off the residents all the time. Let's think about them for once. And I just think, and let's think of the businesses, the small takeaways and restaurants that are trying to survive in the city centre and the gate streets.
It is about thinking about the residents. The reason why we want to do this in the evening is so that we can get the necessary income in, so we can maintain the car parks better, and you know, make them a safer, more attractive place for people to park in. At the minute, our costs are going up every year in our car parking portfolio, but if the parking fees don't go up, we don't have the money to cover our costs even. So that's the reason why we have to do it. And I think people wouldn't mind spending a small fee, because it would be a relatively small amount in the evening, if the car parks were properly maintained and more attractive. Because at the minute, what's happening is that we're getting a lot of antisocial behaviour, which we're having to respond to on an ad hoc basis. If we had a proper contract with a proper company, we could keep these things running much better, and that would, in my view, attract more people in, not less. If you let the car parks fall into even further disrepair than they are now, I don't think if they were free, necessarily people would come in and use them.
Just thinking that point through, I don't see any link to the extra income being linked to what will be delivered in terms of repairs and enhancement of our car parks. It's just left open. So I think people will think it's just a bottomless pit that their money will go into. But in Declan, you're shaking your head. In the report, I can't see anywhere where it says, if they go up by 1%, 2%, this is what we can deliver. That's not shown in there. I didn't mean to jump in there. I've got a couple of other comments, so I'm happy to looking here for some help. Liam, and there was somebody else I missed. Anne. Okay, boy, I am conscious of time, and we will get to the finance report as well. So Liam and then Anne.
Yeah, just trying to make sure I've got my understanding right, that I've not misunderstood this. So we talk about evening charges. Am I correct in thinking my understanding was that bringing in evening charges was also about opening them in the evening? So if they're currently shut, then nobody's using them. So compare it to, say, like Gloucester Quays car park, that's not free in the evening, but it's open. We don't charge for ours in the evening because they're not open, they're shut. So we're looking to open them to gain some income from them in the evening. That would probably be a boost to the evening economy, because people won't think, oh, all the city centre shuts in the evening, I'll go to the Quays instead. They'll probably encourage more people to come into the centre. So this will probably be a good thing for the people of Gloucester and for businesses in the centre, because it'll bring more people into the city.
Yeah, we're trying to think ahead, because with the forum opening in King Square and it being regenerated, we're hoping to bring more people in there, which is why we want car parking in that side of the city as well. So it's a simple question that, unfortunately, our income isn't matching our costs at the minute, and we have to. And I think the government would expect us to do that as well. So I think for a modest charge, I don't think it's unreasonable.
Anne, you wanted to come back?
Thank you. So, a recommendation perhaps to look at whether it's practical to look at those smaller cars, whether having a smaller car could be as part of a second permits. Using some houses have a 1 car or 2 car. It may be utterly impractical. It may cost far more to have categories of car, but it might be useful. It's good to try and encourage smaller vehicles because they use less fuel. We've got a climate emergency. It might be an opportunity. I appreciate when you look at it, it could be utterly impractical. But my recommendation would be something along those lines.
So just very clearly, I think I almost followed you. So you're saying if you've got a small car, you pay less, and if you've got a guzzler, you pay a lot more?
If you've got perhaps a small car, you perhaps get a cheaper permit, yeah.
It's interesting. Does that have you? Yeah, can we look at that? Well, we'll put that as a recommendation to Cabinet from Anne. That's really helpful.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Owen, sorry, I forgot your name. Owen.
That's all right.
Could we also have a recommendation that we consider safe, secure cycling facilities then? Because I think both of those, they're linked in a way that they reduce congestion.
That I drive a relatively small car, because this could be very, seen as very, very in my own favour.
So, Sarge, have you given us the precise wording of the recommendation that you want to add to all of this? So what are you suggesting that we add to the recommendations for Cabinet to consider? Yeah, sorry, yeah, tree.
I wonder, because already I know people who used to eat in restaurants and use takeaways reasonably near the Southgate Moorings car park, that for some time now haven't, or try the ground level, is it Lady Belgate car park? The tiny car park that's, and if they can't get space, they just go somewhere out of town for their meal or their takeaway, because they're not prepared to pay the Southgate mooring cost. Now, I really think it's a great idea to open up the multi-stories and to make them far nicer, especially people that may be travelling a little bit further to come into the city centre at night for things, and I totally get that. But maybe it would be sensible to only levy the evening charge on those multi-stories. Because, that's not going to prevent people then who are local and already use the little car parks and things like that are sort of ground level car parks. But it will mean that there's somewhere nice for people to park who maybe have come a little bit further and are perhaps visiting the Guildhall or something like that, don't know Gloucester, don't want to walk a long way. So that might be a way of hitting both targets.
If you want to put that as a recommendation, we can look at that.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak or ask any comments? Can I just ask a couple of questions? I remember a while ago, there was, I think I'm remembering this correctly, people were welcoming the appointment of a company that's going to run the car park at the Forum. Does that ring a bell? Is there another company looking at, Mr. Hearn? Is there another company that runs the car park at the Forum? And what's the financial arrangement there, please, either to you or Andy Hearn? What's the financial arrangement for the City Council? What do we get in terms of payback? Because the report talks about signposting people to the Forum to park their car. So what are the bucks involved for the City Council by doing that?
It's our car park. We retain the income from the new Forum car park, and Q Park receive a management fee.
So I didn't quite catch that.
It's our car park. We own it, and
I
we
thought it was owned by a
income.
private company. It's not.
No, it's a
Is
management
it run by a
arrangement.
private company?
She's explaining. I think you missed the end of what she said.
But it's ours.
It's ours. Okay. So somebody even told me what the name of the company was.
Q Park.
Q Park.
There's a management.
Can you help me out?
It's owned by the council, but it's a management agreement with Q Park.
And then I found it disappointing that in the report you talk about all the reasons why car parking charges are important and key to all the renovation, all the rest of it. But I couldn't see anywhere in the report, boy, I've made copious notes. I couldn't see anywhere in the report where it talks about the detrimental effect that high car parking charges can have on visitors and the hospitality sector. And I don't see any comments either about the links between the two. So we need to be very careful that we don't send out the message that visitors aren't welcome, and we need to reflect that in how we set our car parking charges. And I think your idea of having different tariffs for the surface and the multi-stories. But I think there definitely is a link, and as Sergeant Terry Pullen were talking about the the nighttime economy, the hospitality sector are vulnerable at the moment, and we need to be very careful. And I'm just disappointed that that isn't mentioned once, as far as I can see, in your report. I do have other questions, but Declan, I'll put them in an email to you and Jane, because of the time, 8:45, and still haven't done the finance quarter, last quarter. Okay, that was all I wanted to say. But the point about the hospitality sector and incentives and what makes people park here as opposed to going on to Cheltenham or Bristol or Bath, it's important, and that's just not addressed here.
Well, one reason for coming to Gloucester is our car parking is cheaper. It'll still be cheaper. It certainly will be cheaper than the private sector and Gloucester Quays.
Chair, I just had one other recommendation. Earlier, we talked about private hire companies and pickup points for customers shopping in the city centre. I often speak to private hire drivers and hackney drivers, and one of the issues they mention is that they haven't got any pickup points by the bus station, by the transport hub. Is there some way that we can find some space anywhere near the transport hub for customer pickup? Because if they go into, private hire drivers go into the Hackney Bays and the Hackney Bays report them to the City Council, they then get points from the internal points, and they can then be dragged in front of the licensing subcommittee. So I think if there's something we can, any arrangement we can make, I think that would be helpful for both the drivers and companies, and also for the passengers and shoppers, especially the disabled and those in wheelchairs, etc. Thank you. So that's a recommendation I would like to put forward to explore if that's not already been done.
Okay, so looking at Lauren, you've got all the recommendations that we're going to link to that report. Liam, it's got to be a very snappy question, very snappy.
I've noticed that on Southgate Street, there's quite a lot of people park on the road down by a lot of the takeaways and the vape shops, and it's often a bit difficult driving up and down there. It can be a bit of a menace. I'm wondering whether we can include something to say we would allow, say, like a 15-minute or a 30-minute, like a quick pit stop, free period that would allow people to park and, say, pop in very quickly, to pop into town for free, unless they're doing a full longer day.
Are you talking about people who make deliveries to shops?
Yeah, either delivery to shops or customers. Say if you want to go into town because you just need to pick something up, or you just need to go to the bank for, say, 10 minutes, a quick pop-in thing.
Yeah, we can build in a 20-minute grace period. I think the BP parking code recommends 15 minutes, but we do 15, 20 minutes, so we can certainly take that into account.
Okay, Karen, you put your hand up. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd just like to. I'd just like to comment on that as a non-car driver and a cyclist, it is the bane of my life, people who park on Southgate Street and block that cycle lane. It is dangerous. So I would really ask you not, especially when we're trying to encourage people to come through and into the main cycle lane where it comes down towards the cross. So, but people parking and delivering to those shops, they just block the whole of the cycle lane, and you're having to go out round them constantly.
We can look at that in the enforcement contract. I think, the general rule for a lot of towns is that they allow it early in the morning.
When I come into the Shire Hall and this place that way, you were talking about smart lights, aren't we? Yeah. So it's lethal. It's lethal.
No, I entirely agree. So that is something we can build into the contract. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that. We'll take a note of it.
Sort of wraps it up, I think, doesn't it, on this issue? Not that I'm trying to rush people, Liam. There are no names. Okay, don't worry. No, I don't mean to be disrespectful. Okay, so can we thank you both for your attention and your answers, Declan? we got your attention for a minute? Can we just thank you for attending? Thank you for politely answering our questions. And it's nearly 9 o'clock and we want to take the last item and go home and have our tea. Well, I do anyway. Okay. Okay, thanks, Declan. Okay. Oh yeah, you're here for the next one, aren't you? Yeah. Okay, so
I'll go home if you want.
Cool. So two bullet points, then we'll go straight into the report. 2 bullet points, is that okay?
Okay, I'll give you 2 bullet points. Yeah, the 2 bullet points are, first of all, I'm a lot happier with the numbers in the sense that the way we're producing them now. The other bullet point is I'm not happy with the numbers because we're a bit overspent and we need to dress up for the end of the year. So I'm happy and I'm not happy. So that's bullet point number 1 and bullet point number 2. Happy to take any questions.
Hi, thanks, Declan. I'm a bit confused. On page 50, it says, this report sets out financial position as at the end of September 2025. It is based on costs and income for the first 9 months. I thought the first 9 months would take us to December. Is that, am I reading that wrong, or is that a typo?
You're not, it should be December. I do apologise for that. I didn't even notice it.
Okay, thank you for that. And just one other question. Waste and recycling, £470,000 for a historic shared service that is no longer received. What's that all about?
I understand it's the Gloucester City Homes grounds contract. Can you elaborate on that, Adrian?
Yeah, the Gloucester City Homes and as like both Kent Council and Gloucester City Homes used our subcontracted through use our services of Ubico. The Gloucester City Homes element decided to drop out. It's so basically the Ubico budget included their cost historically, and no longer does. And we no longer get the income from Gloucester City Homes in, which is separate. The 2 things are separate. We have a cost and we have an income. And the income wasn't the income budget wasn't adjusted.
Yeah. Okay.
So we no longer get income from Gloucester City Homes because we no longer Ubico no longer provides the work to them. They use their own contractor.
So how come we didn't know, and how come there's a lapse there then, isn't it, between, we assumed we were going to get that and then suddenly we didn't. So the notice period and the income sort of doesn't match up then, does it?
Yeah, and that's what we're flagging there in the report, and the positive side of that is the 26-27 budget, which you were presented on Thursday last week, actually adjusted and corrected for that.
Right, so who's at fault there? Ourselves or Gloucester City Homes?
So when we did the revised budget exercise, the big exercise that we did, we didn't do a zero-based budgeting exercise, but we did quite a thorough revised budget exercise. So this income wasn't picked up; it should have been picked up then. But what we have done is in the money plan figures for 26-27, or in the budget you approved 26-27, we've addressed some of the sort of smaller issues that we found after doing the revised budget exercise. So the short answer is it's our error, we should have picked it up.
Councillor Patel.
Yeah, just on the same point as Councillor Pullen, it was our error. It's nearly £500,000. And then we mentioned that it's now been adjusted in the budget for 26-27, but it's the residents and the taxpayers that are going to be paying for that mistake. £500,000. How was it wasn't picked up earlier? And can we recoup any of that money from Gloucester City Homes? Because if it was part of the original contract, how could they just walk away from it and leave us with the burden of a £500,000 loss?
It's not the full, that's an element of it. It's not £500,000 related to that one thing. The actual sale of recyclers and the various other things, there are other factors in there. It isn't the £500,000 isn't made up of that.
Can I just clarify a little bit? It's not missing money or anything. It didn't exist in the first place. It was in the budget and it shouldn't have been in the budget. So that's all it is.
Anybody else? Any other questions or comments? So I just wanted to pick up two things quickly. At 5.9, you talk about, and we did mention this at council not long ago, the car boot sales suffered a series of incidents and delays that have led to there being no expected income during the year. So is that still the case, that we don't expect any income for the car boot sale? And if that is the case, what have we lost? What were we due to collect? What were we anticipating? What was in the budget? What were we anticipating would be the income that we're now not going to get any of?
With regard, first of all, the comment there that, where are we? It refers to 5.9, car boot series of incidents. I think that's being a bit kind. It was a criminal act, which frankly somebody should be in jail for. I
understand that, and there was an incident with the nails. That's right, and then they were cleared up. That was round about the time car boot was due to open, which was quite some time ago. But that's not what that sentence says. It says I suffered a series of incidents and delays. So I'm just asking for some more information about what the series of incidents and delays were. I wasn't aware that there was a series. I thought there was a one-off, which was the incident with the nails. And that was appalling.
Do you mind if I just bring Andy and he's got more details?
There was a reference to a series of incidents. It was a series of physical incidents, which you just touched on, which was things like the nails being spread across the car boot. There was also damage to the perimeter, damage to the fences. But there was also major disruption on social media. So there was a lot of brand sabotaging going on. And just to be really clear as well, on the rent position, because I heard this last week at council, it wasn't lost income. There was never an income budgeted for this year because there was a 12-month rent-free period negotiated within the final stages of the lease agreement. That was a latent negotiation that we did with the operator, largely to help them and help them compensate because they suffered so much in the run-up to the opening of the car boot. So just to be really clear, we didn't budget for it. We did negotiate that 12-month rent-free period.
So thank you for that. So is it anticipated, Declan? So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just conscious of time. Is it anticipated that we'll start to get a steady stream of income from April the 1st?
So it's a 12-month rent-free period from the point at which the lease was signed. So I'd need to check on the exact date the lease was signed, but it will be from that point on.
Okay. Okay, and in the same paragraph, there's reference to the situation surrounding Greyfriars redevelopment, and it says the situation regarding Greyfriars Lost My Place project starts to progress. So that was, I'm trying to remember what this figure was. It was quite a hefty sum from central government. Was it around about 11 million in levelling up fund? And presumably that income's still there. That's hasn't been used as part of any work so far. That's totally still there. Is that right?
Yeah, that's capital spending, yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's sort of ring fenced and...
Yeah, it wouldn't be included here because those are not revenue.
I'm sure like everybody else, we do have loads of questions, but at 9 o'clock it's probably not a good time to start thinking of them. So maybe I'll email Alison and copy you in, Declan, if that's okay. So, Saz Patel, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the car boot sale then, so just wanted to know what would be the annual figure we would expect for a 12-month rent? Because to give away a 12-month rent free when we're in the financial mess, catastrophic mess that we're in, that seems quite generous, isn't it? I wish we could be as generous to the taxpaying residents out there with their council taxes.
Sorry, I missed that last bit, but I think we're anticipating a rent of roughly about 45,000 a year. For a 15-year lease, that's not unusual.
Just one, and I'm interested in this arrangement with a budget manager allocated to a finance officer, because I think that is a really positive move and a positive move forward. I just wondered, is that in place for this report, or is this something that we are rolling out? And my question is, so if a budget manager on, I don't know, doesn't matter, such and such a budget looks like they're going to significantly overspend, what authority or power does the finance manager have over the budget manager? How do we sort it? How do we sort it out? Because putting that in place is to eliminate problems coming. But if problems still carry on and budget managers still aren't managing their budgets, then that's not on, is it?
So we relaunched the budget monitoring process in December, beginning of December. So the first month that was done under the new process was November. So we've done November, December, January. And as part of that process, a monthly meeting happens with the finance officer and the budget officers. That information is discussed in quite a lot of detail. So if there are any budget issues, those budget issues would be reported on the pro forma. That would come back to finance, and we report monthly to SMT. So if there are any budget issues that can't be addressed through sort of wiring money between budget areas, then that would come to SMT for SMT to make a decision depending what it is in terms of what we need to do. I mean, if it's earlier in the year, there's more flexibility to try and do stuff. But when you get to this stage of the financial year, obviously it's more difficult if you look like you're overspending.
But in theory, there should be less reason, or frankly, less excuse for budgets not being managed appropriately by budget managers, because the whole process is being overseen more closely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, because there's been a budget reset, the budget should be more reflective of what the service actually needs. So there are several jigsaw puzzles that were part of the relaunch of the budget process. I mean, it's still evolving, but it already has raised lots of questions, and there's lots of learning going on between the finance officer and the budget officer, which is really positive.
It's quite a positive note to end on, but while you've got us all here, is there anything else coming down the track that you feel you ought to tell us so it doesn't knock us for six when it eventually materialises? Because that's what happened with the meetings last November. When we were given news that was devastating with regards to the finance. But there's nothing I'm not trying to cut you out. There's nothing that you're aware of that you feel comfortable sharing with us about the state of the finances. They haven't got incredibly worse or anything.
No, the information that we've presented to you tonight is up to date as we have about the current financial year.
So we've got one more quarter to complete, then we've got the financial year. Yeah. And so that'll be sometime in April, May?
No. We won't report the outturn for 25-26 until July, when we've closed the accounts. So our statutory deadline for closing 25-26 accounts is the end of June, and that's what our direction of travel is, to get that done on time this year, and then we will report the actual outturn from the.
Okay, and we've got that in our work schedule. It's already penciled in for that period. Okay, so can I thank all of you, officers, staff, members, press, for sticking the course, and 9:05, close the meeting. Thank you so much.